Okay, congratulations to all of you celebrating anniversaries. AA works. I am told on page 159, the last paragraph. And once again, we are looking at literally the formation of the foundation of Alcoholics Anonymous. And again, through sharing their experience, the founders are giving us a vision of what is to come. And they share with us not only the victories, but the struggles as well. And we'll see some of that. So let's get to the text, last paragraph on page 159. A year and 6 months later, these three had succeeded with 7 more. So I think that's, worth making a note of. In 18 months, 10 people sober. 18 months, a year and a half to get 10 people. So what does that tell me? It tells me something very significant. That even though it was extremely slow going in the beginning, and it was, they never gave up. Everybody hear what I just said? They never gave up. It wasn't a numbers game. It's carrying the message, staying sober while we're doing it, and being consistent and persistent in that effort, never giving up. And there's a lot of people probably listening to me right now who got a lot going on in your life, because that's life. We never give up. We never give up. That is what we do not do. Okay? Let's go on. Seeing much of each other, scarce an evening passed that someone's home did not shelter a little gathering of men and women, happy in their release and constantly thinking how they might present their discovery to some newcomer. Now, you got to remember, 10 people in a year and a half, there's no AA at this point. Clarence Snyder is not sober. So there's no one in Cleveland yet with all these big numbers and explosion. 10 people. Yet they gathered together almost every night. Almost every night, right? Our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. Okay? Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. We see it already. Together, we stay sober. Individually, 5,000 years of history is that we perish. Okay? So you got this small group of people getting together literally every night. My first sponsor came into AA in the my grand sponsor came into AA in the 1940s. And I said to him, you guys, how did you do it? There were barely any meetings. How did you do it? He told me we did 2 things. We stayed together as much as possible, and we prayed like crazy. I have never forgotten that. We stayed together as much as we possibly could, and we prayed like crazy. Something to remember. Also something worth remembering. If you know people who got sober in the 40s and 50s, there weren't many meetings. And it was like there would be a meeting, one meeting in a town, right? So in order to go to lots of meetings, it wasn't, I'm going on this side of town tonight to a meeting, I'm going over here tonight to a meeting. You had to get in the car. And this is before the interstates were built. And you had to travel distance to get to a meeting. Now, everybody that's listening to me, wherever you're at in these 20-some cities, there's meetings everywhere. Yeah. There's meetings in the morning, there's meetings at night, there's meetings on every side of town. We are surrounded by meetings, and we don't go. And we don't go. Yet, back then, what I'm getting at something here. The people who came in and stayed sober, remember in the forward to the second edition, 50% at once, 25% after 75%. People came back, did well. We're talking, what, 80, 85%? I think for me, it's always been important for me to look at what were they doing. They had an incredibly high rate of success. What is it that they were doing? When you start talking about willing to go to any length, even the people that travel from Cleveland to Akron and Akron to Cleveland, back in those days, that wasn't the 25-minute drive it is now. And I'm just talking there. I talked to old timers here in Sandusky when I got sober from the 40s, and they talked about going down to Ashland, Worcester, even as far as Dayton. They kept all over. And I would meet old timers when I started to travel around and go to meetings in other cities. And I would say, I'm from Sandusky. And they would say, do you know so-and-so? And I'm like, yeah, how do you know? And they said, son, back in them days, we traveled. We knew each other. Today, with all the resources that we have, so much more than they did. Literature, meetings round the clock, large fellowship, all kinds of help, conferences, conventions, workshops, with all the things we have. Do we have that kind of rate of recovery? No, we don't. By looking back at the past, and that's the beauty of this chapter, we learn a lot of lessons that are applicable today. That's my point in talking about all this, right? Now it's, well, yeah, I went back out. Like it ain't nothing. Surrounded by all this help, all this opportunity, room full of people in here that'll do anything to help you. I'm surrounded by it. And I waltz in and out of here like, and can't understand why. Can't understand why. All I got to do is take a look at their experience. What was it they were doing? Okay, let's go on. Seeing much of each other, scarce an evening passed at someone's home did not shelter a little gathering of men and women, happy in their release, and constantly thinking how they might present their discovery to some newcomer. So they weren't sitting around belly aching about their problems. What were they sitting around doing? Looking to creatively find ways to help people. So where's their focus? Their focus is on helping others, not wallowing in their own problems. It wasn't a gathering of people to sit around and commiserate about all their problems. This was during the Great Depression. People had no jobs, they had no food. These people came together. I talked about the potatoes last week, didn't I? It was everybody bought potatoes. That's all they had, right? They had nothing. They shared with each other what they had, and their focus was on somebody other than themselves. And it says they were happy. So what my first sponsor told me was that the happiness that they had wasn't because of what they had. They didn't have anything. So what does that tell me? That my happiness is not based on people, material things. It's not based on any of that. It's based on what's inside me. How many of us base our happiness, state of mind, peace of mind, on what's outside of us? If I only had this. If I had enough money, I'd be happy. If I had enough money, all my problems would be solved. If I was with him, if I was with her, if I had this job, if I had this house, if I had this car. These people had nothing. And they were happy. So it would seem to me, and this is the lesson he was trying to teach me, that happiness is a byproduct of spirit. That it is not an end result of having something outside of me. Those things are nice. I'm not knocking material things. But happiness comes from within. How many people do you know, wealthy people, you see them in the news every day, don't you? Committing suicide in these mansions. It comes from within. Let's go on. In addition to these casual get-togethers, it became customary to set apart one night a week for a meeting to be attended by anyone or everyone interested in a spiritual way of life. It sounds a lot like our open meetings, doesn't it? Anybody interested in a spiritual way? Anybody can come to an open meeting, can't they? Sounds a lot like it. I think it was kind of the precursor to that. Okay, but things have obviously changed a great deal. But I think it's always kind of been the precursor to an open meeting. Anybody interested in the spiritual way of life? Did it say anybody interested in sitting around and commiserating or telling war stories? No. Interested in a spiritual way of life. This is the message that they're carrying. They're not carrying a message of just go to these meetings. They're running. These are casual get-togethers. They didn't have the structure of AA that we have now. That wasn't the message they were carrying. The message they were carrying was what? A message of what? A spiritual way of life. A spiritual way of life, right? Is that the message that's being carried at the meetings you attend? What is the message that your home group is carrying? Just a rhetorical question. But it's a question I think that needs to be asked. What's the message you carry? Let's go on. Aside from fellowship and sociability, and we do have those things, don't we? We have fellowship, we have sociability. It's what makes this fun, right? The prime objective was to provide a time and place where new people might bring their problems, right? Did they tell the new people to sit down and shut up? What's that? Take the cotton out of your ears and stick it in your mouth? Boy, it's awful hard to help somebody who can't tell you what's wrong with them because they got a mouthful of cotton. A place for new people to come and bring their problems. I would say that would be the precursor to the beginners meeting, wouldn't you? The beginners meeting. Or the open meeting where people who are not even sure what's going on come to find out, right? So that's kind of gave you a glimpse of something that kind of still exists today. It really does in a lot of places anyway. All right. Outsiders became interested. So here's a little history. And everybody, I hope I can make this clear. As I share history with you, because I'm a firm believer that any time that a society fails, it's because it either forgot or never knew where it came from. But with a purpose. Like, we could talk about the history of AA, but I'm not doing that so you can fill your book up full of a whole lot of interesting facts and figures that are fun to read while you're drinking a beer. Okay? I do that so that we can do what? Learn from it something that we can apply today. Recovery is experiential. And if the things that are shared in a meeting aren't able to be taken outside of the meeting and applied, then they have little or no value here, do they? In truth, they don't. So I'll talk about history from the standpoint of, number one, we need to learn from it, right? Because it gives us a whole lot of information about how we got to where we are today and what we need to do to stay where we are today. But also from a practical standpoint of not repeating the mistakes of the past, right? So functionally, when I talk history, I want it to be a functional thing. I want it to be something of some use to you when you walk out of here, okay? Not just a whole bunch of stuff you put in your book so you can go to a meeting and say, well, this is who this was and this is that was. That's all nice, but there's a much higher purpose for doing it, okay? Let's go on. So we're about to have a little bit of it. Outsiders became interested. One man and his wife placed their large home at the disposal of this strangely assorted crowd. Now, the alcoholics in Akron had been attending Oxford group meetings. There came a point as they got a little knot of people, right? They started meeting together on their own, but there's no big book, there's no Alcoholics Anonymous. None of these things are thought of at this point, right? So basically what they're doing is they're meeting and they're sharing how they're living Oxford group principles. That's what they were doing, okay? So as they started to grow, there was a couple in Akron, T. Henry and Clarissa Williams. T. Henry and Clarissa. And T. Henry was pretty much regarded as the head guy in the Oxford group. He was a mogul, if you will, in the Oxford group. And it's also interesting to note that T. Henry Williams, when Bill Wilson, remember when he came for the proxy fight? When that battle cleared up, T. Henry Williams lost his job. Because the place that Bill and them were trying to take that the Chicago people took over, that's where T. Henry worked. So out of that whole mess, there's just so many things that connect these people. T. Henry ended up losing his job. Beautiful home. I think it's over on Dolly's listing. I think it's over on Palisades. Palisades Parkway in Akron. That house looks as good today as it does in the pictures that you'll see of it in your AA approved literature. There's a lot of pictures of that house. That house looks just like today. It's a beautifully built home. And today, you know, that we always knew where it was. People would go by and take pictures of it. It's AA history. But today, the home is owned by some people who are members of AA. And they've had it for a couple of years now. And at certain times, they've opened up that home so people can come in and see where these original, with this right here, this is the home they're talking about in the book. So that's a very cool thing. It's not open every day like Dr. Bob's house, but there are times when they have made it available for people to come in and see. So it's pretty cool. This couple has since become so fascinated that they have dedicated their home to the work. Many a distracted wife has visited this house to find loving and understanding companionship among women who knew her problem, to hear from the lips of their husbands what had happened to them, to be advised how her own wayward mate might be hospitalized and approached when next he stumbled. So what's going on over at T. Henry and Clarissa's? T. Henry and Clarissa are not only providing a place for these newly sober alcoholics to meet, but they are bringing in who? Family. They're bringing in family and providing for them some what? Some information about the problem, some information about the solution that has been found, right? And an opportunity, right, to get help for their spouse when the time comes, okay? Very, very interesting. Really don't talk about that a lot. Really don't talk about that a lot. But that's what was going on at T. Henry and Clarissa's. They became interested not only in helping the newly sober alcoholics, but what have we been screaming throughout the whole book? The family. Opportunities to help the family. Again, and I've continually challenged you and challenged your groups and asked you and your line of sponsorship, what are we doing to help the family? I want to bring this up. Remember how when we went through To Wives and the Family Afterward, how it talked about how when the family adopts a spiritual way of life, it increases, right, the chance of the alcoholic staying sober. So do you see the connection here, right? And even if the alcoholic don't get sober, the family finds a new way of life, and we know that, right? And they can get on with their lives and have a happy, useful, productive life, regardless of what the alcoholic does. But does it not increase the chances of recovery for the alcoholic when the family adopts a spiritual way of life? It said it several times in the book. So again, the significance of what they were doing back then, remember, looking at this extremely high rate of success that they had in those days. Not one of these things was like the reason that they had that. The real reason they had it, and I think we all know it by this point, is because they emphasized the steps in a spiritual way of life and getting a relationship with a God of your understanding. That's what they emphasized. There were not other alternatives, I'm going to say that nicely, being offered. Nobody was saying, you don't need all that, just go to a lot of meetings. Nobody was just saying, you know, go and do some kind of service. All of those things are important. But they're support mechanisms for what? That's what makes us so fortunate today. For the steps. Recovery is the steps. That is what the focus was. And when these guys had you in the hospital, they were not monkeying around. Remember how we went through it last week? When these guys left the hospital, they were already through the first 3 steps. They already were being taken to a meeting that they would become active in. There was already somebody who visited them in the hospital that was their sponsor. So when the guy left the hospital, he's engaged in the steps. He already has a sponsor. He already has a group. He ain't even been to a meeting yet. And you wonder why their rate of success was so high. And on top of that, the family is being engaged as well. So I, again, looking back at our history and learning from that and looking at the success that they had, well, what do we need to look at that they were doing? Well, that's what we're talking about tonight, isn't it? Okay, let's go on. Many a man, yet dazed from his hospital experience, has stepped over the threshold of that home into freedom. Many, I got this highlighted and star by it. Many an alcoholic who entered there came away with an answer. If I come to a meeting, will I come away with an answer? When I come to a meeting, I'm coming to my first AA meeting. I don't care about your flat tire. I don't care about your washing machine. You can talk to somebody about that after the meeting. I'm dying of alcoholism. If I come to your home group, am I going to come away from there with an answer? Or am I going to be ignored? Or are people going to pat me on the back and say, come again next week and walk away from me? Or are they going to say, well, the new people raise their hand, I raise my hand, everybody claps and gets up and goes home? If I come to your home group, am I going to come away with an answer? Again, we are looking at a time when the rate of success, remember, fourth and the second edition, talking about them early years when this thing started growing. What were they doing? They came away with an answer. So what does that tell me about the meetings? The meetings were solution-based. They weren't problem-based. The meetings were solution-based. They were not problem-based. We know what the problem is, right? We know that's what brought us here, okay? Am I going to leave here with any hope? I'm very grateful that when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, and this was back then, I was offered solution. I didn't immediately accept it, but I was offered it, right? And they stayed with it. They never changed. Every day I came back angrier than I was the day before. The message never changed. When you decide you're ready to do this, we're here, right? The answer's the steps, son. Get a sponsor, get in the book, apply the steps to your life, get active in a group, help somebody else. They kept telling me the same thing over and over again. That never changed, right? So at our groups, is that what people are getting? When that hand goes up, are they going to leave there with an answer? Or are they going to leave there with a question, more questions in their head than they can? Because I think that's our job, isn't it? Okay? Let's go on. He succumbed to that gay crowd inside who laughed at their own misfortunes and understood his. So what do we have? Identification, right? That's what takes place. We come, so you come here. If you got what we got, you may not want to be here. You might not like it. You might not understand it, but you know you're with your people. Because these people crazy, and so are you, right? So immediately we recognize, yep, these my people. These my people. I've been looking for them all over the place. Here they are. Your whole room full of them, right? Impressed by those who visited him at the hospital, right? So again, right? This started at the hospital, right? And so again, creatively, let's talk about that for a second. Because that was the door to AA back then, right? Hospital, visits, get them started, get them out. Now they're connected, right? Well, today we don't have that luxury, right? So what can we do to try to get ourselves back in that position? Okay? Can we go as a group and talk to the people who run the detox, right? And there's several people in this room right now, I know, who have volunteered at the new detox here in Sandusky, which is what I'm talking about, right? Where else are they? We got sober houses halfway out there. What can we do to engage creative? This is where we start getting creative, right? When it says your imagination will be fired, life will mean something at last, right? My imagination, what can I do? How can we reinstitute what we know was so successful? So impressed by those at the hospital. So engagement as early as possible, that's my point, right? And how you choose to go about that, get together with your crew, figure it out. Get together with your crew and figure it out. We know all these new people, they come into the meetings, we know who's sending them, we know where they go. What can we do to get ourselves engaged with them as early as we possibly can, okay? Because you can see the effect of it here. He's impressed with those guys that came to the hospital and shared their experience with him, right? And all they did really was tell them drunk logs, right, to get them to identify. Let's go on. He capitulated entirely when later, in an upper room of this house, he heard the story of some man whose experience closely tallied with his own. So what did they do? They got together, right? This would be like a mini speaker meeting, right? And they said, this guy, his background a lot like his, right? What are they doing? They sink in that hook even deeper, right? And we get this man to identify with somebody, and that's when we get that surrender, because that's what we're pushing toward, right? We get that surrender, okay? Let's continue. The expression on the faces of the women, that indefinable something in the eyes of the men. How many times does the book talk about eyes? David A. used to say, we got a lot of eyes in here, right? We got them sad eyes. We got them teary eyes. We got them dark eyes. And then we've got them happy, laughing, smiling, sparkly, twinkling eyes. The first guy whose eyes I saw sparkle in AA was a guy who was in my home group, the Venice group. His name was Rick H. Rick has passed away. Rick died, no. How long Rick been gone, Carol? About 3 years, 4 years? Rick Hammond. Yep. The first guy whose eyes I saw sparkle. Yep. First guy, he was sharing the meeting, and I was sitting in the back, and man, you could see it. And he smiled, and he said, this is a wonderful way of life. And basically what that did for me at this point was made me want to go to another meeting tomorrow. But I saw it, and I've seen it in a lot of eyes since then, right? And it's not something that can be manufactured. You can't fake it, because it comes from in here, right? It comes from in here, right? Let's go on. The stimulating and electric atmosphere of the place conspired to let him know that here was haven at last. So what are we talking about? Spiritual attraction. Spiritual attraction. Not only, it even talked about in somebody's eyes, but it talked about a stimulating and electric atmosphere. There's a lot of meetings that you walk into where the atmosphere is stimulating and electric, isn't it? You ever walk into meetings and you can feel it? That's a good meeting. Those are the attractive kinds of meetings. There's a buzz in the room. There's people smiling, people are stimulating and electric or exciting atmosphere. Do you feel that when you go to your group? Is it stimulating and electric? Or does it feel like a funeral where all we're missing is a body in a casket? Let's do our AA duty, make a meeting. I said, I'm going to make a meeting and get out of here the minute that we can get out, right? What is it, right? They used to always tell us, come early, stay late. Come early, stay late. Not a group arrives at 5 of, point right, try to get the chairs, somebody get right. I'm looking at my buddy Jim, who just had a year over to Venice group, over there early, getting set up, getting that coffee on, right? Clean up afterward. That's what I'm talking about, right? And if somebody need to talk, I don't know about anybody else. I can only share my own experience. I used to go to the morning meeting, which is actually now held in this room every day. It used to be held downtown at the club. And Carol nodded because she was there. And when the meeting was over, my head would be screaming, would somebody please stay down? Because the only place I got to go is to be by myself. And I didn't like being by myself, especially when I'm brand new. Would somebody please stay down here. And many a day, people stayed because they understood that. There was a guy that opened up his house. We used to go over to his house. He would I would be like, please. He would get out a big book. We would sit around. We would talk and I was working midnights, right? So I just got off work, went home, took a shower, went to the morning meeting. We'd stay over there 12 or 1 o'clock. I'm still up. And sometime I would go down to the 1 o'clock, down to the Sunshine Group, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I would do that. Then I would go home and go to bed. And I sleep 5 or 6 hours, get up, have something to eat, go to an evening meeting, and then I had to be to work at 11. So I went to 3 meetings. And I'm working every day, 6, 7 days a week. And I'm going to meetings. I stay. I'm going to share something with you. It's something Mr. Willie said to me when I was new. He said, Kenny, stay close. Stay close to the fellowship. And he said, you will always get the things that you need, but you have to stay close. I stayed close then, I stay close now. The one thing I haven't changed. Stimulating an electric atmosphere. If I come visit your group, you come to ours. Is that what's happening? A rhetorical question. Is it a place where we seem like we're happy to be there? That's a pretty good way to look at it, isn't it? Do we seem happy to be there? I got to say this, and I know a lot of y'all know me. I still get excited to go to an AA meeting. I still get excited to go to an AA meeting. And I hope and I pray that that never changes. I hope and I pray that that never changes. I still have enthusiasm for AA. And I do hope it changes. I hope it grows. I hope it keeps growing. I really do. Let's go on. The very practical approach to his problems, the absence of intolerance of any kind. If the book was published in 1939, and as we read this paragraph, there's no traditions. Traditions Bill didn't put pen to paper on the 12 traditions till 1946. Okay, so that's 10 years after this. Would you look though at the foundation of the traditions of what we're about to read? The very practical approach to this problem, the absence of intolerance of any kind, the informality, right? We have no leaders here, right? The uncanny the genuine democracy, right? Our group, what? What does our group do? Our group conscience, right, is based on what? A loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are the trusted servants. They do not govern. Genuine democracy, correct? The uncanny understanding which these people had were irresistible. Irresistible. Would you write the word attraction? You ever hear them talk about attraction rather than promotion? Okay. What they're describing is attraction. I went to meetings like this. I was attracted to Alcoholics Anonymous. And what is all this based on? Where does it emanate from? It emanates from spirit. It emanates from spirit. Okay. All those interested in a spiritual way of life. That was the first priority. So this emanates from spirit. All right? Let's go on. He and his wife would leave elated by the thought of what they could now do for some stricken acquaintance and his family. When I leave an AA meeting and I'm new, do I leave elated with the thought of what I could do to help somebody else and their family? Do you see what the emphasis is here? We keep coming back to the same things over and over and over again. Okay? Do I leave elated, or do I walk out and go, what on earth was that? Each group has but one primary purpose: to carry its message to who? To the alcoholic who still suffers. Do you see this? Do you see this? And a lot of y'all that's listening to me right now belong to groups like this. I know that because I've been to many of your groups. There are groups like this. I guess the thing that each of us, I love when we get into a work, because this is really like a workshop type setting, is to start taking some personal inventory. Is that what we're about? Right. Do we do that? Definitely. Right? Are people excited to come here? Is it fun? I hope y'all have fun on Wednesday. I have a blast, whether you do it or not. I hope you're excited to come. I hope this is fun. This ain't the punishment or no drag. But Bill used to say, if you think this is punishment, you need more help than we got here. Right? And I believe that to be true. Right? Let's go on.
Oh, I love that statement.
Here's a big one. They knew they had a host of new friends. Can you highlight that and put a star by it? They knew they had a host of new friends. When somebody new comes to a meeting, do they leave with friends? Do they leave with friends? Alcoholism is a disease of isolation, isn't it? Even when surrounded by people. Even the guys I ran with from the age of 5 until I came here at 32 did not know me. We called ourselves friends, but really what we were guys who all had a problem, and we used each other as much as we could. That's pretty much what it boils down to, don't it? Which is why those relationships take a whole different color once you get sober. Not to say that I don't love them and I wouldn't do anything for them, but it's a whole different story once you've been here for a while. But when new people come here, we're lacking, we got some deficits in our life, don't we? And a big one is friends. Is friends. Right? Do I walk up to the new person and say, hey, you want to go to some meetings, you want to hang out, right? I mean, this is, it can be quite overwhelming to come here and not know anyone. I came here, I ain't know nobody. And people took time with me, and they took me places, right? They showed me stuff. They hung out. So I got to take my personal inventory and ask myself, do I do that? And my answer to you would be, not as much as I should. By any means.
That's honest.
By any means. People come here, it says here, they leave with a host of friends. Can you imagine the greeting they must have been getting? People show up here, we go, welcome home, then turn around and walk away from them.
Bathrooms over there.
And again, I can only speak from my own experience. Everybody here has their own group. And I know there's a lot of groups that do this. There are groups that listen to me, I know that do this. Okay. Let's go on. It seemed they had known these strangers always. They had seen miracles, and one was to come to them. They had seen miracles. Would anybody describe what has happened to your life? If you really sit down and take a look at where you came from and where you are today, would you consider it to be miraculous? I know that people who look at us and see what happens to us, people who knew us, absolutely feel it's miraculous. From jails and institutions to a life that no one even wants to talk about, right? To being welcome, to being a part of, right? To be given. To have tragedy strike in your family, or somebody get real sick, or something happen in your family, and have people who would at one time not even admit knowing you, much less tell people that you were related to them. To have those people call you and say, we need you over here. You one of the elders now. We need your input. We need some of these relatives older than me is an incredible and it's a miraculous thing. And I because of AA and God and people like you, I have experienced that. Where my family has called on me and said, we need you here. It's an unbelievable, unbelievable life that we get here. And it truly is miraculous. Let's go on. And one was to come to them. They had visioned the great reality, their loving and all-powerful creator. The great reality. What is this power? Power is love and truth. The great reality. They had envisioned the great reality. Wow, they are describing, stay with me for a second. They are describing what happened to them when they came into this fellowship, into what existed at that time. Look at all this. The great reality, and then what does it say that is? Their loving and all-powerful creator. And I got written beside that, the fellowship of the Spirit. As a common term we hear, we even got conferences called the Fellowship of the Spirit conferences all over the country, right? The fellowship of the Spirit is what this describes. Not the fellowship of people. It is the fellowship of the Spirit. A loving God, as he may express himself in our group conscience, assumes that I have a loving God in my life as a result of these steps. And as we talked about in the workshop the other week, how that translates into our role in our group and the preservation of our unity, our singleness of purpose, right? And our primary purpose of carrying this message. You see how it all comes together here. So as I look back, how in a practical way, because I said this at the beginning tonight, in a practical way, how does this impact me when I leave this room? Well, it's given me a whole lot to think about and to take back to my group, does it not? So practically, is this valuable to me? Yes, it is. Right? And recall, right, the rate of success at that time. Right? Let's go on. Now, this house will hardly accommodate its weekly visitors, for they number 60 or 80 as a rule. So now we've grown in the Akron, Cleveland area over to T. Henry and Clarissa's, this thing has gone from them 10 up to what now? 60 or 80 as a rule. Now, the book was published in 39, right? Okay. So we can see that there's been some significant growth from them first 18 months, would have put you in the middle of 1936, up to, right, 38, 39, when the Cleveland guys showed up. Okay, let's continue. Alcoholics are being attracted. Would you circle the word attracted? They're being attracted. What's attracting them? The fellowship of the Spirit. That's what's attracting them. They're not attracted to something where people are miserable. They're not attracted to something where nobody stands successful and it's not working. They are attracted by the spirit of what's going on in this fellowship, in which people are staying sober, got miraculous changes in their lives, and they're happy. And I want you to know it's not material, because we are, again, we're in one of the worst periods economically in the history of this country. The fellowship of the Spirit. They're being attracted. Again, our group's attracted people. People want to come. The people look forward to come. There are meetings I look forward to going to. Anybody in here know what I'm talking about? I look forward. There are Alcoholics Anonymous meetings in this area where I live. There are Alcoholics Anonymous meetings around the country. And I ain't going to start naming them because y'all around the country are going to get mad at me if I don't call yours. But there are groups in this country, I get excited to go to them meetings because it is just everything that's described. That excitement is booming. It's booming, right? Let's go on. From surrounding towns, families drive long distances to be present. Now, a community 30 miles away has 15 fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous. 30 miles from Akron will get you where? Cleveland. So at the publication of this book, we got 15 guys in Cleveland, Ohio. Now, it said be in a large place. We think that someday its fellowship will number many hundreds. Many hundreds. Now, this was written in 1939. Many hundreds. How many people in that fellowship in that city today, right? How many meetings in greater Cleveland, right? I mean, if you include all the suburbs, couple thousand, I would say, it would be safe to say. Meetings, I'm talking about, not people, right? 1939, Bill Wilson says, we think that there are going to be a lot of people come into this deal in Cleveland. And again, he was right. Okay? Again, he was right. Okay, mark that spot.